All welcome. And we're going to go over a really cool topic that hopefully will empower you and understand that a lot of my work. Great morning to you, Bear Sage, triple RO. What does triple RO mean? I always get interested in these Substack names. Great morning to you. What is that one? Yuche Scribbles. Great morning, Yuche Scribbles. And thanks everybody for your support. This is going to be a really good one. Great morning to Ellie Jill Dornick and Kathy Unavailable Sample, and Kathy Unavailable Sample. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Um, this is going to be a cool one, and just remember that all of the work that I do, whether it be my book, my Substack, or the Make Sense with Dr. JC podcast, is really just taking advantage of something that in such a simple, subtle yet simple way and powerful way, if we can just allow ourselves to not let our subconscious mind, our conditioned programmed subconscious mind call the shots for the day, which would require that we spend some time thinking for ourselves in a world that is thinking for us, we're going to be positioned to become the dominant force creator and shot caller of our day. So the whole premise of the time that we spend together, whether I'm interviewing somebody on the Writer's Way or we're doing these Monday rise ups that end up on the podcast, it's just a time for you to tap into that part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, where you think. You'll know you're thinking because I'll say something, then you'll go, which stands for haven't made up my mind yet. That'll be the name of my TED talk. And you just have this time to say, I don't know what I think about that. Let me think about that. That's what it means to think for yourself rather than let your automatic process that enables you to sleepwalk and make a sandwich without even knowing it, um, to run the show. So that's what our time together is to grab a fresh new perspective, a vantage point by your choice to look at things so that the things that you look at begin to change. So great morning, David Thomas, Joshua Dubell, KN. Of course, Lori Melton is here. Great morning to you, my friend. And welcome, welcome, welcome. And I encourage you, or I guess I'm asking you to share this away. I always say at the end, if you learned something today, give it away. That's how it's going to stay. And as you can see, we're recording this in the podcast studio. So this episode in its shorter, cleaned up version, potentially with some of your interactions in it, if it's good and spicy and you guys ask some good questions, um, will end up on the podcast. And I'll be happy to give you guys a shout out. Otherwise, it's going to be cleaned up, shortened for the podcast community. Very excited. The podcast this month is tracking at almost 350,000 downloads in a month. And for anybody that's looking to start a podcast or has a podcast, that's a good thing. And in the sense that you're making a bigger impact, but it just comes from being consistent and not listening to the voices in your head that say that your podcast sucks and nobody cares and all of that stuff. So many lessons there. So let's get into this. Thank you, Lori. So I call this Finding Superman. How did humanity get so soft? So I'm a big fan of the science of flow, the flow state. And there's a lot of really cool videos and stuff about that. Hey, Ananya. Ananya. I love that. Ananya's great. Ananya's a great member of the Substack community. She writes great stuff and she supports everybody. So big shout out to Ananya. So there's a lot of cool stuff on the flow state, like Finding Superman. It's a great book. Um, this is different. This is about, I'm sorry, The Rise of Superman. This is about finding Superman. And just to give you a quick little uh, snackable about what this is going to be about so you can decide whether or not it's relevant for you. So today we're going to explore how society, culture, and even comfort itself have tamed the tiger within us. I don't know if you hear that and think that's good or a bad thing, but there's this tiger inside of us, this thing that has been tamed. And we're going to take a look at what it looks like to reclaim what Friedrich Nietzsche called your will to power. There'll be a lot of Nietzsche stuff today. So this is not about judgment, right? Judgment is silly. Judgment is just a rendition of your depiction of reality, right? I mean, if you judge something, I think it's just a waste of time. So this is not about judgment. It's about remembering who we are and what we can become once we choose to just simply let the tiger out of the cage, out of its imprisonment. So I was thinking about this, which made me say, which as a reminder stands for haven't made up my mind yet. I was just thinking, have you ever noticed that the world that we live in, we all live in the same world, right? It might look different to all of us, but we all live in the same world. And that world that we live in didn't make us soft. Like if you have anything that you're a little soft on, meaning, you're afraid to do it or you procrastinate it or something like that, or you choose comfort versus discomfort. But we live in a world that didn't make us soft by accident. And have you noticed how the world that we live in many, many ways, seems to be designed to keep us soft so that others can prosper? So that would be a place that we can validate taking a look under the hood of this one, right? I mean, do you want to remain soft? You might think that you're remaining comfortable or remaining happy and not pushing into discomfort. But what if you found out that you're being enticed to do that for the benefit of others? That might be a way for you to prompt, hey, let me take a look at this rise up that he's doing. So let me get into this. This will end up as a Substack as well. So the first time personally, let me share a personal experience. The first time I woke up to witness what I call humanity's softness was during a humanitarian trip to Haiti. So I had done a lot of humanitarian trip. I was a doctor. I created my own organization. We were in Haiti after the earthquakes, and we created this whole thing where we would take hundreds of doctors and thousands of doctors, and we would provide all of these services. But it turned into a bit an event, an experience of sort. So the first time that I witnessed society's softness, humanity's softness, is when I was in Haiti, and we had brought together, probably as usual, about another 100 health professionals, and they were there to go through this experience that we had, where they were able to serve the less fortunate. And they were doing that in the aftermath of that terrible earthquake that happened in Haiti. I was just drawn to that, and I ended up making it a big thing. So we provided love, healthcare, food, and we constructed basic shelters, schools, and orphanages, and we rescued children. Children were just getting left in the streets, and we were rescuing them and putting them in shelters and orphanages and stuff. And so just a lot of great stuff, right? A lot of lessons that I learned there. But at the end of the last day, the experience would always have like some sort of a guest speaker. Remember, I'm telling you about how I first woke up to the idea that humanity is getting soft. So we had this amazing guest speaker. His name was Dr. Patrick Gentempo, and Patrick's just a pioneer in the wellness industry. He's just a great guy, great human. And he was there to speak to the community and all of these people that were just basking in service. And we would always have these speakers there with the hopes that they would kind of share from their heart and help make sense of what everyone had just gone through, right? Because when you're in an environment where you're giving, 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 and serving, 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 very often you can get mistaken, or you can misunderstand what's really going on. By the way, the biggest distinction, and this will come out in my book, that I made when I was like a mission man, is that I was actually doing it to feel better about myself. Isn't that interesting? But anyway, that's irrelevant right here. So he had brought his young son with him. So he was like very, very exhausted and emotional. It's exhausting to do that work. And he opened up to this crowd of about 100 people. He opened up by saying this. He goes, and I'm going to say a swear, I apologize, but that's what he said. He said, "How the hell did we get so fucking soft?" And that was his observation of spending the day out there where people just had it really, really hard. And that's what woke him up to how soft we had become. And that was a big thing for me. That made me start thinking. Um, and this was followed when he said that, it was followed by a pause. Like he didn't even know what to say after he was so entrenched in that thought. Um, and he was just giving everybody time to think, and it just turned into a very, very powerful conversation. So it was, as I said, it was what I would call an awakening. You know, an awakening is an interesting thing. An awakening can only happen if you've been asleep. So what I mean by that is I had been on some sort of autopilot, which we have a tendency to do, and sleepwalking to this idea that we have been progressively getting soft. And sometimes you see it, like I love to put these pictures up of like a kid taking a dirt jump off of a bike in the 80s and say, back then we used to do this and stuff like that. And everybody loves to bask in that. But so somehow this led me to a lot of Friedrich Nietzsche's work. And I'm going to share some of that with you today. So his philosophies, Friedrich Nietzsche's philosophies, were very, very powerful, but they were kind of made of dynamite, if you think about it. And the reason why I say dynamite is they were kind of designed to blow apart the illusions that have a tendency to keep us small, obedient, and asleep. I love that idea. And sometimes I like to look at my podcast and my Substack like this, and a lot of your Substacks as well, as dynamite that is there to blow up the illusions that we often have because of our conditioned mind and society that we live in. So I like a little controversy every now and then, a little disruption. So if you're a disruptor, please share your Substack with me. So Nietzsche examined how society assigned meaning through things like religion. And this is a big one to wake up to. Assigned meaning through things like religion, culture, and authority. And Nietzsche rejected it. He just rejected it. So for him, when it came to meaning, he said the meaning of life was not something to be acquired from the outside. I talk a lot about this operations manual that we are handed at birth, right, by our mother, father, teacher, preacher, society, and evolution. So he doesn't like that idea, and I'm not a big fan of it either. He says that meaning is something that had to be created by the individual, by you. So his answer to all of this stuff, this rejection of what he was noticing, was something he called the Übermensch. I think that's the way I pronounce it, which translates to overman or superman. Now, just for the sake of today, we can say superhuman, right? But this is just coming from Nietzsche, so it's not a only man thing, right? I think the Übermensch refers to humans, men and women, more now than ever. So this was introduced in his work. If you want to take a look at it, something called "Thus Spoke Zarathustra," and the Übermensch was not like some sort of a good or mythical person, or I'm sorry, the Übermensch was not like some sort of a god or mythical creature. It was just a version of you, the version of human that dared to rise above conformity. There's a version of us all that dares to rise above conformity. And that's also attached to things like taking responsibility, you know, for the meaning of life, right? I mean, I think that life is just one big struggle of whether or not you're going to take responsibility for your life today, right? Very easy to take responsibility for other people's lives, but tough to take responsibility for your own. So the Übermensch was, in Nietzsche's eyes, the evolution of humanity, the one who embraces and says yes to it all. And that includes life, hardship, all of it. Because of learning that, I started to have a different answer when people would say, "How are you today? Hey, how are things?" And I would just say, "It's all good." So that was like a cue to remind myself to allow my tiger to come out of the cage, meaning embrace it all. And we'll get a little bit more into that. Great morning to you, Mary Chantel. And there's a great Substack name. Really? I love that. It's great to have you here. Really? Really? Sometimes I look up at the sky and go, really? So at the center of Nietzsche's vision was his one of his most famous claims. And here's the way it goes. He said, the world is the will to power and nothing else. Absorb that for a second. Sometimes it's hard for us to admit that we're all value seeking missiles, meaning we don't think, say, or do anything that doesn't have value. And the reason why that's hard is because we think that that means that we're selfish, but it's true. You wouldn't be here right now had you not determined that it had some sort of value to you. We're value seeking missiles. But when it comes to power, and this is kind of like Gay Hendricks' work with from the Big Leap about limiting barriers. Um, if you ever want to hear Gay Hendricks stuff, first of all, his book is just one of my top 5 favorites. But he was a guest on my podcast. But when it comes to power, sometimes we're taught to not outshine others, and that power is a bad thing. In the wrong hands, it could be, but we all have a will to power. So the will to power is not only about dominance and tyranny, which is what it looks like sometimes. It's the underlying force of life itself, our drive to grow, to overcome, to expand beyond what is, to expand beyond. Are you done? Or are you interested and curious to expand in some way, physically, mentally, financially, beyond what is? Or is what is, I mean, I like to live in the present moment, but I still have some things I want. I'm moving towards. I'm not done yet. And that could just be experiencing things. So it's that final push that is required that forces maybe a seed to break through the soil. Another way of looking at it is that final push that helps a child go from crawling to sitting to standing to walking, and the one that fuels the innovator inside of us all to risk everything for an idea. Have you ever risked everything for an idea? That would be your Ubermensch. And it's the source code of existence, as Nietzsche says. And yet, here's the point. Here's the observation that we can take a look at, which requires your prefrontal cortex, right? This is not coming from your lower level of your brain. We're going to take a look at something right now, but look around, right? What do you see? You see, if you take a look, you see comfort, abundance, convenience, victimhood, and in general, what I call softness. Now, I'm not saying softness is a good or a bad thing. I'm just pointing it out and calling it something. Bitcoin Awareness is here, Only Always by Sutton. And once again, my favorite name of the day. Really? That's awesome. So somewhere along the way, the tiger inside us became tamed. You can look back at other times and just say, hey, I'm glad that I don't have to go through those things. But things were a lot harder back then. So let's talk about this idea of taming the tiger as we welcome Ivan to the show. Now, remember, if you guys have any questions or insights that you want to share, you want to join this conversation, please feel free to do that. Like I said, if it ends up on the podcast, which is a very, very big audience, the Make Sense with Dr. JC podcast, then you'll get a shout out, and I love collaborating with fascinating people. So if anybody has anything inside them that they want to share and it ends up on the show, it'll end up on the show. So when it comes to taming the tiger, Nietzsche's world was absolutely still full of hardship. I don't know if you know this, but Friedrich Nietzsche actually died from some form of Alzheimer's or dementia. He actually lost his mind, and that was it for him. And a lot of people said he was so introverted and went so deep with his thoughts that he never found his way out. Isn't that interesting? But his world was full of hardship, war, poverty, illness, and survival. So he comes from that perspective. Today, most of us in developed nations no longer face those struggles. We might have those things, but we don't face the struggles like we used to, which is a good thing in my eyes. So the modern day has wrapped us in conveniences. And if you don't notice these things, you won't notice these things. Food is delivered at the click of a button. climate-controlled homes that keep temperature to our liking. I woke up this morning and I said to my wife, "It's too cold in here." It's too cold, and because 'cause we're kind of in transition, and we're probably gonna put the heat on now, and I'm probably gonna say, "Oh, it's too hot," right? So it's climate-controlled temperatures to our liking, as well as homes that keep us safe from storms. Isn't that nice? There's a reason to wake up in the morning and say thank you and look up and see a roof over your head and feel snugly in your blankets. So technology handles tasks that once demanded sweat and grit. And is this a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know, and I'm not sure I care. I just want to point it out and think and slow down the computer and the program and think. So it always depends on how we look at things. So, in one sense, I could say this is progress, but progress has a shadow. I love that. Progress has a shadow, doesn't it? The very forces that comfort us can also have a tendency of dulling us down. Am I right? So, the drive to overcome, the will to power, seems to have atrophied. That's the observation, and I say seems. I could very well be wrong. I've been wrong many times. So, who do we have here? Coach to Mochila is with us, and Juan Scooch. Great names. I would love people to explain where these names come from. Koj to Mochila. And then we just had Kumal Kapoor. That's a cool name. So the drive to overcome, the will to power, seems to be atrophying in our society. We're becoming a species that avoids discomfort rather than embraces it. Why bother? If we can avoid discomfort, we're wired for that now. If we can avoid, now we hear in personal growth that we should move towards discomfort because growth takes place out of the comfort zone, but we're kind of losing sight of that. Why bother? If you can be comfortable, why bother? So even in personal growth, some of the greats, the gurus, we see remnants from these gurus prompting us to do the work, to suck it up, to embrace the suck, and to grind and have grit and things like that. But then we all return back to our beautiful air conditioned homes, and we seem to be retreating from the very conditions that once forged things like resilience and prompted the opportunity for things like perseverance, right? So does this mean we're doomed? I don't think so. But we're just going to start waking up to stuff. So let's talk about victimhood. Where did victimhood come from? So it doesn't seem to stop at comfort. As convenience grew, so did this strange new form of identity that is called victimhood. Where did that come from? Who was the first person that just posed as a victim, right? And stayed there? Because it's everywhere right now. It's a business. It's a business. So we begin defining ourselves less by what we could endure and more by what has happened to us. We live in a society that defines its reality, shapes its reality by explaining what has happened to us. That's why it's such a dangerous thing to say something like, "How are you today?" Very often people will say, "Oh boy, let me tell you, things have been hard." We all want to compare our hards with one another, don't we? So the narrative shifted from "I overcame this" to "I have suffered." Life became progressively unfair, and it seems to be continuing to become progressively unfair. I see it everywhere. People complaining that things are unfair and dressing it up as them standing up for justice. Now, I'm not saying I'm on one side or the other. It's just an observation coming from my part of the brain that uses thought. Right? So Nietzsche would warn us, if he knew about what was going on today, be careful not to let old wounds become who you are. So to him, victimhood was the opposite of creation. So that's one of the problems I have with being a victim is it takes me out of the creative process, and that is where I long to be. And that's what I love about Substack and a lot of the stuff that you guys write about is the creative process. When I interview people on the writer's way, that's all I really want to know is where'd you come up with that? Oh, cool. We have Some people chiming in. Never let a moment become a mindset. Well said, Matthew. Matthew Brownfeld. How are you, my friend? Cassie has joined us as well. Good to have you all here today. Um, and if I'm not aware of your Substack, please reach out to me, direct message me. I will always take a look at somebody's Substack, and if it moves me, I will make sure that everybody finds out about that. So, to Nietzsche, victimhood was the opposite of creation. It was a surrender of that will to power. Instead of saying yes to life, victimhood says, life has defeated me, and that's not fair. That's not fair. So, modern culture, amplified by social media, right? Social media came as like, hey, we got this cool tool that we can all speak to each other, but we didn't know what we were getting in addition to that. So, amplified by social media rewards this whole stance of victimhood and it keeps us quiet. Remember how I opened up and says, we don't live in a world that made us soft by mistake. We live in a world that is kind of designed to keep us soft. How are you being kept a customer of softness in your life right now? And if you're not willing to understand and look at that and admit it, I get it. I would probably be prompted to not as well, but it's very powerful when you can identify things that you're tolerating that don't need to be tolerated. So Juan says philosophy in the tragic age of Greeks. Oh, that's probably one of his things. So just remember, we're in the live right now. And if you guys put something in the live comments, I don't know where those go. So when this goes and it posts, you can either repost it or just send it to me personally if you want me to read something. It's very hard to keep track of things. I recently put up a post that went viral in the notes section, and it's like, holy cow, like 9,000 people messaging me. So just reach out and message me personally. There's Chad Moosing Books joined. Hey, Chad. Okay, so modern culture amplified by social media rewards this stance. Outrage, grievance, and sensitivity often get more attention, often, way, way more often get more attention than resilience and strength. You see that on the news, right? We see negative things. Victims like to watch victims on TV, don't they? If you're a victim and you see another victim, kind of makes you feel a little bit better about your victimhood. So they resonate with them. Nietzsche would shake his head if he were alive, I believe. He would see society has become addicted to being wronged instead of rising. So there's something called the drum major instinct. I have something in my life called my board of directors, and this is a fun thing for you to do. So in my office, on the walls, I have people that I go to. They've all passed away to ask questions when I'm struggling in life. And one of those people is Mandela's up there, Gandhi's up there. One of those is Martin Luther King. Very big Martin Luther King fan. I know a lot about him. So Dr. Martin Luther King described something very, very similar, with similar force when he spoke of something called the drum major instinct. And that's that inborn desire that we have as humans to be significant. Interesting. To lead a band in the parade and matter ultimately. I think that's what we all want. I think in the last 10 minutes of your life, you're going to reflect back and say, did I matter? Right? Think about that. You're not going to think about all the things you're worried about right now. You're going to ask, did I make my time count? So we have this desire to be significant and to be the leader in the band and ultimately have that desire to matter. So Martin Luther King's challenge was not to extinguish this instinct, but to channel it towards service and justice for all of humanity. So that's another thing I want you to see is that we run away from power and responsibility because of its perception that it's attached to overwhelm. And that's another hidden barrier that Gay Hendricks talks about in The Big Leap. We back away from things because we're afraid of being successful and overwhelmed by it. So Martin Luther King is just reframing that and saying, with power comes responsibility, but also the ability to make lasting change for all of humanity. We all have this inside of us. You don't have to let other people do these things. So Nietzsche, in his own way, said the same thing as King. Don't deny the will to power. Own it, direct it, create with it. The Übermensch, which is his creation, is the one who takes that instinct to lead and channels it into becoming a creator of meaning. Nothing has meaning without you giving it meaning. So you are the creator of meaning. What that means is that you can give whatever meaning you want to something, but just make sure that the meaning you're giving something has not been given to you by somebody else, because that's soft, in my opinion. So the creator of meaning, a builder of values, a force that rises rather than retreats. And yet here we are in a world that teaches us the complete opposite, and it starts right from school in the beginning. We tell children to sit still, not to question authority, not to rock the boat. We teach them the nuance of, if you don't succeed, well, we used to say, try and try again, but now they say, if you don't succeed, well, then just simply try something else. Uh-oh. Houston, we have a problem. We train workers to follow systems rather than innovate. All of the biggest companies and the biggest leaders give the keys of innovation to their employees. That's why they have such great family organizations in their staffing in their organizations. So we reward compliance today rather than courage. So it's no wonder that the instinct has turned inward, evolving into apathy or exploding into destructive ways. So when you see apathy and destructive ways, now you understand what's going on behind the scenes. Don't hate the player, hate the game. I never get angry at people that are manipulating the system. I mean, it's not that I encourage them and I don't advocate for them, but if somebody's out there to make money right now, you're going to probably be doing something that's not advantageous to humanity. That's where all the money is in many cases. So, how did we get so soft? So, the answer is simple. This is one I want you to really embrace. The answer is simple: how we got so soft. We got comfortable, and innovation is promising more of it. The absolute truth is this: we seem to be mistaking comfort with progress. Does comfort equate to progress? Take a look around and look at the innovations and advancements and the ease that is promoted through technological advancing, AI, everything like that. The perception is that that is progress. Nietzsche would say, I'm not sure about that. So we're latching onto the idea that the elimination of struggle is the achievement of life and the meaning that we all search. The elimination of struggle is the way. But the Stoics said the obstacle is the way. But struggle was never the enemy, right? It was the training ground. I just spoke to a coach today that I'm mentoring. And I was just saying, fall in love with the work, fall in love with the training that you're going to get today by doing the work, and detach from the outcome and expectations of the things that are out of your control, like whether or not people are going to become clients of yours. Fall in love with the training, just like you do in the gym, right? I don't get attached to a flex down at the end of a gym. Usually I walk out there with my tail between my legs, but I'm in love with the work. So it's a training ground. That's what it is, isn't it? So when we eliminated discomfort in our society, we also eliminated the very soil in which our superhero can grow. So the result is a culture that is shrinking now. We are shying away from hard work, hesitating at tough decisions. Why do we hesitate at tough decisions? They're the ones that we need to go after, right? Hesitating at tough decisions and avoiding challenges that might leave a scar. All things that lead to the growth and success that you desire, unless you've given up on it. So the result is this shrinking culture. But Nietzsche would argue this: those scars are sacred. They are proof that you have lived, evidence that you have trained. The scars are evidence that you've trained and proof that you dare to say yes to life even when it is brutal. Do you accept the challenge when life gets challenging? The Ubermensch doesn't ask for an easy road, it demands the mountain to conquer. And you all have that inside of you to demand the mountain to conquer. Nietzsche also taught that life requires us to die many times. This is a very interesting concept. And that doesn't mean like actual death. He once wrote this: "You must be willing to burn yourself in your own flame. How could you rise anew if you have not first become ashes?" Man, think about that. Isn't that the truth? I can tell you that my biggest tragedies and failures have shaped who I am today. That's for sure. So for Nietzsche, transformation meant death. And here's what I mean by this. This is a really cool concept that if you grasp it, take it with you today and think about it, write about it. And if you write about it, tag me on it. I want to hear your words. So Nietzsche said that transformation meant death, not just the final death of the body. That's not what he was talking about, but the daily deaths of old beliefs, identities, and comforts dying away. Things that no longer apply, that no longer serve us. The death of who we were yesterday so that we can become who we are to emerge as today. Nietzsche. So, this constant cycle of dying and rising is what makes growth possible. Yes or no? However, most of us resist it. We cling to jobs, relationships, and labels that no longer serve us. Why? Because letting them go feels too risky and like dying. But Nietzsche would say, good that death is necessary. There's a great book called Necessary Endings that I recommend to everybody, if this is vibing with you. So the Ubermensch, created by Nietzsche, is forged through 1,000 deaths and rebirths, through the courage to let go of what no longer fits. I experienced this firsthand, by the way. I experienced firsthand in the jungles of the Amazon, and I went probably about 4 or 5 years ago to experience plant medicine. And I won't get too deep into that, but I experienced what it was like to have ego death. And that was an example of me shedding something that no longer served me. And I created a new ego that's much, much better. So every time we burn away an old version of ourselves, we clear the way for something new and more substantial, freer, more alive. It's a different way to reframe and approach struggle. So Superman, Superwoman, is not found by holding on to things. It's unveiled by letting go again and again. That's what Nietzsche was saying. So let's talk about reclaiming this. So where do we go from here? Let's make this relevant for the day. Where do we go from here, and how do we, in Nietzsche's words, become what and who we are truly meant to be? Well, first of all, you'd want to do that. Remember, the first step to having a massive awakening is the recognition that you're asleep. If you don't want to acknowledge that you're sleepwalking in certain elements of your life, well, then an awakening is not in your cards today. So you'd have to really, really think about that. Really says, thank you. This is great. Really? I love that. I want to meet you. So the first step in reclaiming your superhuman is this: remembering that the will to power has not disappeared. It's still in you. That tiger, it might be tame, but it's still in you. It only has been silenced and forgotten. Every human carries within them that instinct to rise, the drum major instinct, to create, to lead. You know that's still inside of you. The tiger has been tamed, but not killed. You need not believe in this because this just is. The second step is this: reframing hardship. Instead of seeing challenges as punishment, see them as your training ground. Muscles don't grow without resistance and being torn down. Neither does the human spirit. Love this. Hey, there's my beautiful wife. Mika Stapleberg is otherwise known as the chicken. So I'm the dragon, and that would be the chicken. She's the world's greatest sex therapist. I love my wife. And I'm not just saying that, but she likes to hear that stuff. Hi, my sweetie. So the second step is reframing hardship. Instead of seeing challenges as punishment, see them as your training ground. Muscles don't grow without resistance, neither does the human spirit. Third step is to choose. Probably the hardest thing. Nietzsche never promised this path would be easy, but he made it clear that the alternative is worse. I always say, what's the risk associated with trying versus doing nothing? Doing nothing carries the bigger risk, and it's a guarantee. But he made it clear that the alternative is worse. Take the blue pill, Matrix reference, take the blue pill and continue to shrink into victimhood, like most people, to surrender into apathy, to live small, and that is like death while you're still alive. To just allow that to happen. That's the blue pill. Or choose to take the red pill and select the inconvenient, unknown, and inconvenient path of the extraordinary super creator that you are, that embraces that all is necessary. Everything is necessary. And you know this, but you'd have to embrace it. See, I believe that the saying is true. Life actually does suck, and then you die. If you really think about it, for the most part, life is full of suck, and then we die, which is why I have chosen to continuously learn to dance in the rain and embrace the suck. Why? I want to have a great life. And if most of life is, you know, adversity and suck, well, then I'm going to learn how to enjoy that, right? If everything that we desire, especially the great stuff, sits mysteriously and inconveniently on the other side of a big pile of poop, well, I'm going to learn how to traverse, go under, through, and sometimes even realize that it's not there, the poop. I'm going to be a poop navigator. So this amounts to a bigger life experience if that's something interesting to you. So the storms will come. The question is not if they will come, but how will you meet them, as a victim or a creator, as tamed or untamed, as small or as a superhuman. So my final thought, my dragon thought, Nietzsche didn't hand us a map. And I'm not handing you a map here today. I'm just pointing something out, and I hope that it was a benefit to you. He gave us a stick of dynamite. That's what Nietzsche gave us. He challenged us to take a look at this, and his challenge was not to follow, but to take this stick of dynamite and explode the walls that look to keep us small. That's what you need. And maybe this awakening today is your stick of dynamite that will help you explode the walls that look to keep you small. He wanted us to rise, not in the afterlife, which is not a guarantee. You can hope that that's the case. But a lot of people will say, this is it. You're in heaven right now. This is it. This is your shot. So don't wait for the afterlife, but here, now, in the mud of existence, this world yields and provides us every day. Somebody said the other day, I've been praying to God for the key to what I'm looking for. And I said, well, what are you trying to build? A friggin' piano? Because every morning, the big guy in the sky lets us wake up and live. That's the key. You got too many keys. We just have to take the key and turn it. That's what we need to do today. So this world that we live in, this is heaven on earth. It yields everything you need, including the will to power and nothing else, as Nietzsche would say. The only question left is this: will you claim it and reclaim it? Will your Superman rise again? Make sense? So as I always say, thank you so much. If you learned something today, please give it away, pay this forward, share the podcast, share my Substack, share your Substack. Let's all grow together. You learned something today, give it away, because that's the way it's going to stay. So have a nice day, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye now.